Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Portland, Oregon's premier citizens forum. We're delighted you're with us today. I'm Don Williams, president of City Club. Today our speaker is Ted Wheeler, chair of the Multnomah County Commission. His topic, taking on the tough ones, the plan for Multnomah County. For the benefit of our radio and television audiences, please turn off your cell phones and other electronic devices. First, a few announcements. Join us next Friday when we will have a panel on the challenges and opportunities in East Multnomah County. The panelists include Gresham Mayor Shane Bemis, Travis Stovall, who's the executive director of the East Metro Economic Alliance, and Gene DeMaster, Executive Director of Human Solutions. A little over 4 hours. That's when you're invited to drop by the City Club Commons for our final Friday open house. You can talk to members of the research committee who completed the recent City Club report on reforming the initiative and referendum systems. Food in a no-host bar will be available, and the event is from 4:30 until 6. It's free, open to the public, and no reservations are required. Join me in welcoming 3 new members, and I'd ask them to stand, hold your applause until all are introduced. First, Carolyn Woodward-Wheatley, Jim DeCourcy, and Maris Sumrall, who is CEO of the Library Foundation. Welcome to City Club. How many of us have tried to make sense of the various healthcare proposals offered by the presidential candidates? Well, now you have a chance to hear a national expert on the topic and give his perspective. Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel of the National Institute of Health will be City Club's guest on the evening of January 30th. He'll lead a discussion about healthcare reform and the solutions for what he considers to be a broken system. The event's free and it'll be Wednesday evening, January 30th at the City Club Commons. Please call Kim at the City Club office for your reservations. It's from 6 to 7:30. Each week you come to a Friday forum, you'll see these funny little name tags on your table, and we encourage you to fill one out and put your name and your name of your organization or company, and then introduce yourself to the people at your table. Now, the first time I came to a City Club Friday Forum was about 35 years ago, and the person next to me who informed me about this tradition was former City Club President Ogden Beeman. 2 weeks ago, City Club lost a great friend and a leader in Ogden, and Ogden passed away. He had a passion for City Club and especially for City Club research. We will miss him greatly. We wouldn't be able to have these wonderful City Club programs without the support and generosity of our corporate sponsors, and please join me in thanking our sponsors this quarter, who are Edelman Public Relations and the law firm of McEwen Gisvold LLP. County government traces its roots to England over 1,000 years ago. Although they have a long history, county governments don't often grab the headlines. In fact, the author of one of the few books on county governments recently wrote, "The political science profession has not fully discovered county government. However, there are over 3,000 counties spending billions with a workforce of over 2 million. The author concludes, perhaps counties walk more softly than other governments, but occasionally they dramatically assert themselves. Well, we hope today will be one of those occasions. We're pleased to have Ted Wheeler, Chief Executive Officer and Chair of Multnomah County and Chair of the County Commission, as our speaker. He was elected in 2006 and took office just about a year ago, a little over a year ago. We often hear people lament, why can't more qualified people and those with business backgrounds run for local political office. Those asking this rhetorical question should be happy about Ted Wheeler. After graduating from Lincoln High School, Ted earned a degree in economics from Stanford University and then 2 master's degrees, an MBA from Cornell University and a master's in public policy from the John Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. Before his election, he worked in management positions for Bank of America and Copper Mountain Trust. He's an expert on government as well, and in 1993, he wrote a book entitled Government That Works, Innovation in State and Local Government. He also taught political science at Northeastern University. Now, I might add that each week when I talk to the speakers to get a little background information, I always ask the following question. Do you have some kind of personal information or hobbies that's not on your resume that might be of interest to the audience? And to illustrate that, I always use an extreme example. Well, have you ever climbed Mount Everest a couple times or something like that? On Wednesday, when I asked that question, Ted responded, well, I've gone on 3 expeditions to Mount Everest, and I summited in 2002. He also completed the Ironman Triathlon in Kona, Hawaii twice, and he snowshoed to the North Pole with his wife. So it's not surprising, he's also an Eagle Scout, and of course, finally and most importantly, a City Club member when he rejoined when he moved back to Oregon a few years ago. Now, how does the county dramatically assert itself? Please welcome Ted Wheeler, who will let us know.
Thank you very much. And just right off the bat here, well, first of all, my name is Ted Wheeler, and I am the chair of Multnomah County. And I just want to make a special point of pointing out that I am still married. My wife, Katrina, is still here despite our honeymoon to the North Pole. And I will just say this right up front so that there's no question lingering in your mind that prevents you from hearing the rest of this speech. Yes, it was the stupidest thing I ever did, asking my wife to go to the North Pole on our honeymoon. Katrina, thank you for being here in particular as my partner in all of this. I'd like to acknowledge as well that my parents are both here and my brother Tom. I really appreciate your being here as well. I want to start off by thanking the City Club for giving me this opportunity to just share with you today some of my thoughts about where Multnomah County is and where we're taking it. And I want to thank all of you who have been very supportive of county government historically in the past. I actually agree with Don's comments about county government kind of being the government that's quiet, that slips under the notice to most people in the community. But for me, it is a very important branch of government. In fact, I think it's probably the most important in a number of regards. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So it has been a very interesting year. I can confirm that. And for me, I think it's been a very productive one as well. But before I get into the details on all that, I want to extend a thank you as well for giving me the privilege of serving. I'm mindful of the fact that it is a privilege to serve in public office, and I'm also mindful of the fact that that privilege can be revoked at any time. I do believe that public service still is a noble calling. And just to give you an upfront view of my view of government, I do believe that government is a force for great potential good in the community. I believe that right down to my heart and to my soul. And it is worthwhile to me in that regard, and that's why I'm passionate about it. This is what I would describe as probably one of the most interesting times in a long time to be holding elective office anywhere, nationally or even here at Multnomah County. As we get into the thick of another election cycle, you can almost just sense the palpable frustration and the demand for change on the part of the electorate. I think they have a sincere sense that the institutions of government increasingly aren't paying attention. They're not relevant. They're not being accountable. They're not doing what people want them to do. And there's a sense that the institutions of government across the spectrum, from the federal government all the way on down, are disconnected from the community that actually gives them the authority to exist in the first place. And I want to confess, I share that frustration. I think we've reached a time in history where elected leaders across the board need to be honest about the problems we face. I think we need to be direct about the tough choices that confront us. I think we have to just acknowledge straight up that you cannot get something for nothing. And for me, leadership means that you actually have to challenge the status quo in a way that is most certainly going to upset some people along the way. We have to hold business as usual up to a very bright light for all to see what it really is. The status quo, business as usual, far too often has as its underpinnings a foundation that's fractured, that's fragmented, that won't work going forward. But we also have to do more than just calling out the problems. We also have to put real, workable solutions on the table. And as I say, some of those solutions aren't going to be popular because they do challenge the status quo. But we have to fight and build consensus for those opportunities to come to fruition. I believe that's what you elected me to do, and that's exactly what I've done as the chair of Multnomah County. Whether it's questioning the way that we abate taxes in this community, whether it's how we fund or don't fund regional transportation infrastructure, whether it's how we manage the increasing costs of our local jails, or whether it's issues around how we can better serve people in need in our community. I hope you've noticed that my administration has not lacked either directness in our approach or resolve to improve things on behalf of the entire community. So with that preamble, I get asked a lot, do I like being county chair? Is it fun? Let me answer the question this way. As Don pointed out in his introduction, I am passionate about mountaineering. It's something that I think is just terrifically fulfilling. But there's an old saying in mountaineering that I think is very appropriate to my role as county chair as well. When you finish a long expedition or knock off a tall peak, it's often described by mountaineers as being like having somebody rub sandpaper in your face. It feels so good when it's over. I think that captures the spirit of what my tenure as Multnomah County Chair has been like. It's really tough getting the initiatives passed, particularly the ones that we have chosen to deliberately pursue. But as we knock off those individual initiatives, I will tell you, it's very satisfying and it's fulfilling. So, being straight up, I can't look you in the eyes and say, yeah, it's been fun, exactly, being your county chair, but I can tell you it's been tremendously fulfilling and I've enjoyed the challenge. Don also mentioned I came from the private sector, and I bring with me a whole series of both perceptions and skills that I brought from that previous career to my career as county chair. I will tell you, coming into the public sector, yes, in addition to being fulfilling and challenging, sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes it's daunting. It's most certainly always enlightening, and I can assure you it's never been boring. But it's always been an honor, and again, I just want to restate my thanks for this opportunity. So let me just start off by giving you some context of what Multnomah County actually does. In addition to sliding under the public view, as Don mentioned, it's a fairly complex layer of government, and that's one of the things that's really fascinating to me about it. You've heard speakers come here before and say unequivocally that the first role of any government is to provide public safety to the people. I want to tell you, I have always agreed with that philosophy. But Multnomah County government is legitimately different in that we have not one focus, I think we arguably have three charges that we are obliged to fulfill on behalf of the community. First of all, public safety in our community is a top priority for Multnomah County. We have an independently elected sheriff who I know is here today. We have an independently elected district attorney. We have a Department of Community Justice, which reports to the board and the chair, and we also have a facilities department that has a role related intimately to our ability to provide public services. We do things across the spectrum that include providing court facilities, prosecutorial capacity, jail cells, providing patrolling functions, both in unincorporated areas of the county as well as on our riverways. We operate parole and probation operations, juvenile intervention and prevention programs, treatment, substance abuse programs, and mental health services, all of which are intimately linked to public safety in this community. Those services combined receive over half of our discretionary dollars, so they are a core obligation and an important responsibility. Our second core obligation, besides public safety, is around health and human services. We do provide the services on behalf of government for people who have literally nowhere else to turn. People who suffer from either physical or mental disabilities. The very frail elderly who don't have other family infrastructure that they can rely upon. Those who suffer from mental illness and those who are impoverished. These services are important because we are the government of last resort in all of those areas. If you slip through the cracks at Multnomah County in any of those areas, there is nowhere else for you to go. I think they're important, and the reason I'm passionate about them is because they really define who we are as a community. They say a lot about us in terms of how we help people in our community who are the most vulnerable. The third priority area, and I don't want to give this short shrift, but it may sound like I am, there are services that we're required to provide, either because the state government requires that we provide those services, or we've entered into intergovernmental agreements that require that we provide given services, or the people have determined through initiative that they want county government to provide certain services. These are some of our most notable and most beloved services, like tax collection. We also run elections. We maintain roads and bridges. And I did hear that the Library Foundation has a table here, and the Friends are here as well. We operate one of the largest and I think one of the most well-run public library systems anywhere in the United States. So in sum, it is a vast array of services. They're all important. Of course, we're facing many challenges as well. Not one elected has probably ever come onto this stage without whining about the need for more money. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell you why we don't have any. Thank you, Todd, for laughing. I appreciate that. It is a little frustrating as I look at the economic environment and I see the city of Portland debating how are they ever going to spend all this extra money that they've come into. The governor declared recently that the state has adequate resources, and they're feeling very good about their fiscal picture. And I know what you're all thinking. What the heck is wrong with you guys at Multnomah County? Why can't you get your act together? Why do you keep cutting your budget? What's wrong with you? I want to answer that question directly. What's wrong with us is that by statute, our sources of revenues are extremely limited. We're heavily dependent upon property taxes. And as everybody in this room knows, the citizens of this state, for better or worse, have chosen to limit property tax growth to 3% per year through measures 47 and 50. Now, what does that mean for us? Let me give you a hint. Core inflation is running at 4% right now. If our major source of revenue is fixed at 3%, what that means is we're going to be cutting our budget. Anybody here who's in the private sector, if your revenues are coming in behind your projected cost increases, you know that that's not a good sign. That's a recipe for bankruptcy. At Multnomah County, we're trying to get around some of those issues. There are other challenges that we're facing as well. There's been some notable leadership issues at Multnomah County. I don't think I need to dwell on them here, and I want to make the case later that we've moved well beyond those. Furthermore, there are languishing projects that Multnomah County has not stepped up to the plate to address in the way that we need to address. The $60 million Wapato Jail for example, still sits empty. The Sellwood Bridge, we've not secured the funding for it. There were questions about whether we were ever going to get to the East County Justice Center or not, and other projects and programs that have languished. I believe our entire board this year has done a fantastic job of taking ownership of those issues and putting proposals on the table that help us address those issues. So, what did we actually do this year? I don't obviously have time to go through the whole laundry list, and frankly, I'm not sure that's a productive use of our time. At the end, I really want to hear your questions. But I do want to give you just a survey of some of the types of issues that we accomplished this year. Let me start with the East County Justice Center. State law requires Multnomah County to provide court facilities in East Multnomah County. For years, we've been relying on a single courtroom in Gresham, despite rapid population growth in East County. For decades, people have known that that facility was inadequate. There have been 24 studies over the last 30 years outlining the need for a new East County court facility. 30 years. But there wasn't political will, there wasn't leadership, there wasn't funding, and frankly, there were tensions between Multnomah County government and East County jurisdictions that I think kind of poisoned the pool, so to speak. I'm very proud to say that this year, the Board of County Commissioners moved that project forward. We found the funding, we found the political will, we've acquired a site. We will be breaking ground this year in the Rockwood neighborhood of Gresham with the full support and partnership of the City of Gresham. I'm very proud of that fact, and I particularly want to acknowledge the hard work of Commissioner Lonnie Roberts, who's our East County Commissioner in our Facilities Department. I don't think Commissioner Roberts is here, but I wanted to acknowledge his hard work. Number two, our Racial Disparity Initiative. I think this is a perfect one to talk about at the City Club. We see ourselves as being a very forward-thinking and progressive community, and in most ways, I believe we are. But the facts tell a different story when it comes to disparities. There are measurable, demonstrable disparities that exist in this community around a whole host of issues. There are three that I believe fall squarely at the feet of Multnomah County, and this year the board funded programs to address all three. First of all, we have a notable overrepresentation of minority youth in our juvenile corrections facility. That's not the sheriff's issue. That falls squarely on our Department of Community Justice and the Board of County Commissioners. We have that disparity, we've taken ownership of it, and we have supported a program that's going to help eliminate that disparity. Second of all, mental health services. It's well known in the mental health community that African Americans have different mental health needs and respond to different types of intervention and treatment than the population at large, because there are different issues leading to mental illness in that community. Yet we have failed to fund previously any sort of a specific program around those treatment needs. I'm proud to say that this year the county partnered with OHSU, with the City of Portland, and with the state to open an African American specific mental health facility that will begin taking patients in the very near future. The third area is around healthcare disparities, and this is one that particularly concerns me that I want to focus on in a little greater depth today. In our community, as in other communities, communities of color experience much worse health outcomes than the community at large, even when you account for socioeconomic differences. What does that mean? That means you can't just chalk it up to poverty. Those demonstrable disparities are resulting from something else. What the new research is showing is that those disparities are resulting from inequities. Things like where people live, how close they are to freeways, whether or not they're living in impoverished communities that aren't as clean, toxic neighborhoods, problems with housing, things like chronic stress, uncertainty about jobs. We now have the data which clearly shows that those play an important role. Nationwide, infant mortality amongst African Americans, it's twice as high as amongst whites. In terms of coronary heart disease, the mortality rate's 20% higher for African Americans than whites. In terms of strokes, the mortality rate for African Americans 30% higher. I don't think we should accept numbers like that here in Multnomah County if we truly view ourselves as a progressive and forward-thinking community. The good news is we have funded a program. We're engaging around discussions to help the community understand how these issues come to pass. And it's not something that government can or even should solve alone. We'll be working with the private sector. We'll be working with community organizations and churches to have this conversation and hammer out specific plans to address these disparities. The good news is this local effort fortunately coincides with a national effort around healthcare disparities. I want to alert you to the debut of a television program that's coming your way in the very near future. It's called Unnatural Causes: Is Inequity Making Us Sick? It's a 7-part mini-series that we are co-sponsoring. We'll be holding screenings of this presentation in 4 of our libraries, as well as OHSU and PCC Cascade starting in February. I think this is a natural for the City Club. I would love to see people in this room not only participate in those screenings, but also participate in the discussion groups that are going to result as a result of those screenings. The first one of those comes up on March 3rd in the Central Library at noon. We'll be playing it for 7 consecutive Mondays in the Central Library, and if you go to our website, you can see the other places where we're going to be doing that. I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of the Health Department in making this happen. Thank you very much. The Vital Aging Task Force. This is an area that you've heard a lot about, but you probably haven't heard much in terms of what it means and what the plan is. You've all heard about the aging baby boom demographic and what it means in terms of our community. For Multnomah County, I'll tell you what it means very specifically. We have 5,000 employees. We're going to lose 1/3 of them over the next 12 years to retirement. And these aren't just any jobs. These are skilled jobs. These are clinicians, they're doctors, they're engineers, people who we need to make sure come into the job skilled and trained. We're going to be competing against the private sector for those same individuals. Well, yeah, that's a problem, but the Vital Aging Task Force was created not so much to just talk about the problem, but to talk about the opportunity around aging adults. Most adults who reach retirement age, in fact, 85% of them, want to stay engaged in the community, but they're too smart at that point in their career to want to work from 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. They're seasoned and they're experienced. But what we're going to have to do, both in the public and the private sectors, is we're going to have to be more flexible. We're going to have to be smarter in order to take advantage of that opportunity by offering job sharing, flex time, telecommuting, retraining for seasoned, experienced adults who want to try a slightly different career at the older portion of their life. Multnomah County will be one of the few jurisdictions in this country that is prepared for that opportunity, not only around employment, but also around civic engagement and volunteerism. I'd like to acknowledge Commissioner Maria Rojo de Steffi, who is here. Thank you for your leadership, co-chairing the Vital Aging Task Force, and Jay Bloom, who's actually the coordinator for the effort. That's also being done in conjunction with our Department of Aging and Disability Services and our Department of Human Services. The Sauvie Island Bridge, I'll just make quick note of this since I mentioned Commissioner Rojo. Did anybody notice the bridge moving down the Willamette River a couple of weeks ago? That's the largest public works project on the West Coast right now. And I'm just proud of the fact that it's reached a milestone, it's moving forward, and it's an example of the great things that can happen when we really put our minds to it as a community. I'd like to thank our bridge crew that's just an outstanding group, and I'd like to thank Commissioner Rojo again for her leadership on that issue. Sustainability initiatives. That's something you've heard a lot about in this room. You've heard about global warming. You've heard there was a conversation around the concept of peak oil. There's clearly a need for innovation around green technologies. And as I go out and meet with the business community, I hear a lot of passion and enthusiasm around supporting our green cluster of industries and how we can help foster growth and job creation around green industries. Well, Multnomah County is very committed to these efforts. We see sustainability as being not only an important community value, but we think it's also a good business practice for us. Last week, our county proudly adopted one of the most progressive green building policies anywhere in the United States. Going forward, all of our facilities, whether we purchase them or whether we renovate them, they will meet gold LEED standards. Moreover, by 2030, all of our facilities will be carbon neutral. Now, before anybody goes, whatever happened to the old Ted Wheeler, the guy who was just the bottom line fighter? He's not gone. He's very much part of this equation. I actually believe that these facilities will be more efficient. They will operate more smoothly. They will lead to increased productivity. Our energy costs will be lower. And therefore, it is a good bottom line move in addition to being consistent with community values and in addition to the obvious benefits to the environment. I will tell you this, I was somewhat surprised that we were able to pull this off given the condition of some of our current facilities. I don't know how many of you here work in the county courthouse. The sad-looking guys in the back. One of the first things I learned when I took over as county chair was that in order to get the elevator to the 4th floor, you have to flush the toilet 3 times. So we have high goals and aspirations. By the end of the calendar year, Multnomah County will also have one of the largest photovoltaic installations in the state of Oregon, with an estimated output of 1 to 2 million kilowatts per hour per year. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. If you do know what that means, you know it's huge. What it means is Multnomah County will eventually double the solar capacity in the state of Oregon. So again, that fits well with our plan for carbon neutrality in our facilities by 2030. Commissioner Kogan, could you wave or stand up so people can acknowledge your leadership on these issues? This was an issue that Jeff was working on while he was at the City of Portland, and he's brought that spirit and passion to Multnomah County, and we all benefit as a result of his leadership. The warrant strike force. What is a warrant? A warrant is an outstanding, basically, it's an opportunity, well, it's actually a claim for arrest against somebody who's currently thumbing their nose at law enforcement and not being held accountable for what they have done previously. There were 30,000 outstanding warrants in Multnomah County, and it cut right to the credibility of our ability to hold people accountable in our criminal justice system. Well, we've entered into a partnership with the district attorney's office and with the county sheriff, and there is now a warrant task force, a strike force, that's getting at that backlog. In the last several months since this plan was funded, we've actually eliminated half of the warrants that we have the ability to eliminate. There have been 82 arrests of people who previously were out there under warrant. They've committed crimes, and nobody was holding them accountable. By working together, we're now holding them accountable. Commissioner Nato isn't here today, but she really led the way on this, and I want to acknowledge her hard work on that. One of the toughest things we deal with as a county institution is the delivery of human services across the county. It's been known for years that demographic changes in Multnomah County have been leading county policy in terms of how we actually apply our services. Let me give you a specific example. We know that poverty is shifting eastward. It's moving from the downtown core in Portland, and it's moving eastward out to Gresham, Fairview, Wood Village, and Troutdale. But our services haven't followed as poverty has moved. Why is that? Well, it gets back to that question of the status quo again. We're supporting institutions and helped establish and build institutions in this community that are very effective at what they do. They're beloved. They have long lists of supporters. But if we continue to fund the same institutions, even when the need is shifting, we're not doing our job. And we're not pursuing the best public policy, and we're not getting the maximum bang for buck in terms of deliverables for what we're investing in those services. In addition to poverty shifting eastward, families with children are also moving eastward. A lot of the services Multnomah County provides around health and human services are geared towards families with children. The dollars and resources need to follow where the need is the greatest. And under the leadership of Lorenzo Poe from my office, we've convened the Sun Oversight Council, which looks at the way we deliver services all across the county. It was a very tough process up to this point. He was working with school districts, he was working with other governmental leaders, he was working with community organizations that provide the service. And I'll tell you, those conversations were direct, sometimes heated, and always passionate. But at the end, that group got to a place where we now have a new method for delivering services. It sounds wonky, it sounds processy, but it's going to have a real impact in the community where we deliver those services. Emergency management. Here's one of those issues, Don asked me up front, is this one of those positive speeches or is this one of those scary speeches? And I told him it's a little of both. This illustrates the point. Emergency management. Multnomah County has a very important statutory role around responding and planning for widespread disasters in our community. You all know about the health department's important role in planning for pandemic flus and epidemic breakouts, and they do a great job of planning and tracking and responding. But what about the other things? Earthquakes, for example. Well, when I took office, about a year and a half ago, there was a study that came out. It was an independent study evaluating our emergency response, and it was damning. It was horrible. What it basically said is we had the wrong people who were unfunded, without a plan, with an emergency operations facility that didn't work. I mean, that was pretty terrible when you consider that it's the county that's responsible for funneling all requests from local jurisdictions up to the state. That's our formal function, coordination of emergency services in Multnomah County. I took that very seriously, as did my fellow commissioners. We not only brought in an expert who can lead us around emergency management, we tripled the capacity in terms of human resources. We've now quadrupled the grant funding that goes towards emergency operations. We have a state-of-the-art emergency operations center that worked beautifully during its first operational test, which unbelievably was during the nationwide top-off 4 emergency management exercise. That's kind of like testing out your new tennis racket at Wimbledon, just to give you an idea of what that was like. So I'm happy about the direction we're headed, but we're a long way from where we need to be. 2 issues I want to touch on briefly, and I'm sure this will generate some questions. Number 1, transportation. Number 2, jails and public safety. With regard to transportation, as many of you know, the county is responsible for 27 bridges and 300 miles of roadway. That's geek speak. The part you need to know about, collectively over the next 20 years, we have nearly $750 million in deferred capital maintenance backlog, predominantly on the bridges, but also on the roads. The Sellwood Bridge is halfway through a process whereby we're going to identify whether we rehabilitate or rebuild it, and if so, what it's going to look like. We know that the new Sellwood Bridge is going to cost approximately $300 million to replace. The Sellwood Bridge needs to be fixed or replaced because it's very important in the scheme of transportation in this community. It's the busiest 2-lane bridge in the state of Oregon. 30,000 vehicles a day cross it. So in that regard, it's very important. We've had to lower the weight limits on it several times, so now emergency vehicles and buses can no longer use it. As you know, it's a problem that's been decades in the making. Much has been made of the fact that the federal adequacy rating for the Sellwood Bridge on a scale of 1 to 100 is a 2. It's still safe. That's what the engineers are making sure of, But you know what? I don't think we can sit here in 10 years from now and make that same claim. We've got to get at it. And we've started the process, and darn it, we should finish it. What I've proposed is we put a vehicle registration fee on the ballot. It would be $24 per vehicle per year. It would have a 20-year sunset. It would collect $100 million to collect the local matching dollars for the Sellwood Bridge, and it would also meet some of the needs on the other Willamette River bridges. The job won't be done there, though. We then have to go to the region and to the state and the federal government and get the additional dollars we need to close the deal on that. I hope you will support us in that effort, because the way it looks right now, it's touch and go. State statute requires Multnomah County, in order to put a VRF on the ballot, a vehicle registration fee, to get the permission of all overlapping jurisdictions with populations of greater than 400,000 and all jurisdictions encompassed in Multnomah County. That's TriMet, Metro, Washington County, Clackamas County, Portland, Gresham, Fairview, Wood Village, the city of Maywood Park, Milwaukee, and Lake Oswego. Can you imagine how silly I looked as the chair of Multnomah County walking into the chambers at Lake Oswego and asking for permission there at Lake Oswego in Clackamas County for permission to take an ask to the ballot here, to ask you, the people who paid for the Sellwood Bridge, for the people who maintain the bridge, to ask you if you want to raise your taxes to support the infrastructure that you own. You know, that's crazy. We need to really reevaluate the way we fund infrastructure, and that includes looking at the creation of a regional bridge authority to spread that responsibility wider. Finally, to move to something less controversial than taxes, public safety. As you know, we did a comprehensive public safety study over the last year. It was the first comprehensive study that looked at all of the public safety services in Multnomah County, everything from police to courts, prosecutorial capacity, treatment services, victim services, jails, the whole kit and caboodle. And what it concluded was we have serious imbalance in our public safety system. After 7 years of progressive cuts at Multnomah County, we have actually limited our ability to keep a lid on crime. But the same study painted a very broad and glorious vision of what our system could be like if we were able to rebalance it. Yes, that could lead to another ask. It could, but that's not determined yet, and if it did, we don't even know what kind of an ask it would be, when it would be, or what would be included. But I just want to warn you, we have a clear blueprint, at least on the adult piece of our system. But before we ever ask you, there's two other issues we have to address, and I'm just going to do them in a couple of quick sentences so I can wrap up on time. The Wapato Jail. The Oregonian this last Sunday ran an editorial, and it basically said the credibility of the county institution is in jeopardy, particularly on public safety matters, until we open the Wapato Jail using the resources we currently have. I agree with that. I agree with that. Conversations are ongoing. It's not easy. We're building partnerships to make it happen. I don't have news to report today, but I do believe that between the sheriff, between the Board of County Commissioners, and our Department of Community Justice, and potential partners at the state and elsewhere, we will be able to get that facility open. But we're not going to open it just for the sake of opening it. We're only going to open it if it makes sense in terms of adding value to the community, and if we can do it on a cost-effective basis. And both of those have yet to be demonstrated. About that latter point, the cost-effective basis, as you know, I have a concern about the increasing costs in our county jails. It is relevant to the Board of County Commissioners, even though we have an independently elected sheriff, because we fund those jails. Over the last 7 years, we've increased the funding by 10%, but we've closed 400 beds. The sheriff and I agree that's not acceptable. We need to do something differently. We need to get a handle on the costs in our local jails. The sheriff and I are working together. We've had productive conversations. The unions have been involved as well. I think we're going to get to somewhere good, but we have to be accountable and we have to be cost effective. As you know, I've put some very radical proposals out there on the table, and I will take them to the public in the form of charter changes if we are unable to negotiate accountability into the system. It's not a matter of luxury. We have to get accountability back into our corrections system locally. Those proposals range from having an independently elected sheriff to less radical proposals that include creating a Department of County Corrections that would be under an independent and professional manager. Bottom line, we need to do something different than the status quo. We're willing to take some heat on this. We're certainly willing to hear your points of view on it, but we cannot land back at where we are today with business as usual, because it's not going to help us fix the problem we have in terms of costs in our jails. So I will end there with a positive note. I just want you to know your Board of County Commissioners is working hard. We're working professionally. We're collaborating. We're building partnerships. The county organization is working overtime on your behalf. We have some amazing public servants amongst our 5,000 employees, and we have a top-notch management team. And I just want to tell you, we're just getting rolling here. This is just the start. I am very optimistic about what we're going to be able to accomplish in the coming years, and I want to thank you for your continued support. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, you can answer. Thank you, Ted. Asking questions is a privilege of City Club members. Please limit your questions to 30 seconds or less and end it with a question mark, not an exclamation point. Our first question today will be asked by our board host, Carla Kelly. Among her responsibilities on the City Club board is chairing the program committee, and she and her committee deserve credit for the high quality of the 44 programs they put on each year. Carla is general counsel of the Port of Portland, and she's been a member of the City Club since 1996.
Thank you, Don. I think you touched on this a little bit when you talked about the bridges, but there's a bewildering number of jurisdictions within the county. And, you know, you look at Metro and TriMet and Portland and Gresham and all of the smaller cities, and many of them have, of course, overlapping missions and priorities. What are the major coordination problems that those overlaps are causing? How much time does your staff have to spend trying to manage those overlaps? And are there any fixes you would recommend that you think would provide more efficient or higher quality public service?
Yes and yes. First of all, there are too many overlapping jurisdictions with too many overlapping missions, with too much administration that's basically going all towards the same type of duplication. Some specific areas where we need to leverage off of each other rather than just competing. First, around the delivery of human services. I can't sit here and tell you that I'm sorry to see the City of Portland expand its mission into human services that are very similar to the types of things that Multnomah County is doing as well. But if they are going to expand their mission, we need to coordinate much better. Specific examples. Remember the budget debate last year around sobering? I don't know if anybody remembers that. I'm probably the only one in there. Jeff remembers. Thank you, Jeff, for saving me on that. That's a service that benefits the City of Portland, but in terms of our core mission, what we do, providing those services that nobody else can logically provide, that are integral to our core competency, we were going to let that one go, given that we had to make cuts, and it created a bit of a dust-up with the City of Portland. So this year, we're talking earlier and coordinating our budget so we can make sure that there's no confusion. Emergency management. Mayor Potter and I have been working hard with our emergency management and facilities organizations to see if there isn't a way, based on our experiences in Top Off 4, the emergency management exercise, to actually create a co-located emergency operations center so that we're communicating in real time around emergencies. And then, of course, as bridges, as I mentioned briefly, Multnomah County, with that $750 million deferred capital maintenance backlog on our roads and bridges, I'm just going to tell you straight up, we do not have the financial capacity. We never had the financial capacity and we never will have the financial capacity to maintain that infrastructure the way it needs to be maintained. We need a completely new model in terms of managing those bridges. And I'm proposing a regional bridge authority, and I'll keep pushing for that at the regional table. And I'm sure there's 15 other ways that we could coordinate as well.
Erwin Mandel, City Club member. To return to the East County Justice Center, I'm sure it's going to be a fine building, but in order to function, it has to be staffed and operated. What plans are you making to be able to staff and operate that Justice Center, in essence, to avoid another Wapato?
You will remember, excellent question, thank you for asking it, because you will remember that when I was campaigning, in fact, I think it was in a debate right here in this room, during my campaign to get this position, I had great questions, grave questions about the East County Justice Facility. I hadn't seen the operations plan. In other words, who's going to be in it, what facilities, what are they going to be doing, how much is it going to cost, and where are the revenues going to come from to ensure that it's sustainable. In other words, how do we prevent building another Wapato? I've seen those operation plans. We've culled them out. We've refined them. The big answer to your question is most of the people who will be in that facility are going to come from our Hanson facility, which we are going to close. So we're really shifting a lot of resources. Those are sheriff's folks that he will be shifting from the Hanson facility that we need to close and moving towards the East County Justice Center. We'll also be working in cooperation with the city of Gresham that will have a police presence that they will pay for in that facility.
Thank you.
Andy Robeson, club member. Chairman Wheeler, as an expert on government, I'm sure you're very aware of the late 1970s, early 80s trend toward privatization in government. In Multnomah County, that manifested itself in the Hooper Detox Center and the entire mental health delivery center services. In mental health, we saw ourselves go through a series of difficulties, Mental Health Services West, Unity, etc. We now have Cascadia Behavioral Health, which largely because of the Byzantine nature of Medicaid billing is in severe financial difficulty and is talking, I understand, about closing the Delany Center, the major service center for African Americans with mental health problems. As chairman, are you currently involved in trying to find a solution to this pending problem?
Could you be specific? Are you talking about Cascadia in particular?
Yeah, there's a $2.7 million audit finding hanging over their head, and they've had a series of ongoing financial difficulties.
Yes,
and,
yeah, okay, I just want to make sure that was the piece you were referring to. The answer is yes, that in fact Multnomah County and all the citizens of Multnomah County have a very vested interest in the success of Cascadia Behavioral Health. I think something like 80% of the people that we work with who have or suffer from mental illness are going through Cascadia. I will tell you that our Director of Mental Health Services, Carl Brimner, as well as our Director of the Department of County Human Services, Joanne Fuller, have been very actively engaged with the leadership of Cascadia to help them in whatever way we can assist them in getting them back on their feet. But I will remind you that they are merely a contractor, and I say that in the sense that our relationship with them is merely contractual. We don't run Cascadia, we don't own Cascadia, we don't set policy for Cascadia, but we certainly want to help them in any way we can to help them remain viable.
Justin Gottlieb, City Club member. I'm wondering what direct actions is the county government taking, if any, to keep our small and family businesses here in town that are emerging entrepreneurial from locating in Washington or Clackamas or Clark counties?
Well, you know, that's near and dear to my heart because in my last life I used to be a business owner. And I used to deal with things like code enforcement. I won't go into the long story, I'll keep it quick. But I know some of the problems that are being faced by local businesses in particular in this community. I think the first thing that government should do, and this is not very startling, but it's surprisingly rare, is listen. Commissioner Kogan and I are in the process of going around and talking to business leaders all around. And really, I just wanted to hear what they were thinking and how we could be of more help. And instead, what we're hearing so far is, oh my gosh, I've never met with anybody from local government before. And these aren't just small businesses. Some of them are actually also major employers. But as you know, the 40,000 small businesses in this area provide over 75% of the jobs. So small businesses are important too. This year we did two very specific things. Number one, we reformed the business income tax and increased the owner's exemption, which we believe will help business owners, particularly small business owners, have more capital to put back into their businesses. And second of all, we fixed a loophole that existed in our tax structure that effectively invited venture capital firms to leave the community. Why do we care about that? Because they are the ones who are providing a lot of the seed capital for small and emerging businesses. So those are two ways that I think we've been directly beneficial this year.
Jason Wax, City Club member. I have a question about the Sellwood Bridge initiative. You took that first to Troutdale City Council, I believe, and I've looked at the minutes. It didn't seem like it turned out the way you probably hoped. I'm wondering if you have any insight into what happened and why you chose Troutdale. Thanks.
Well, we didn't choose Troutdale. The question was, Troutdale so far has not agreed to the IGA that would allow us to put the vehicle registration fee on the ballot. And what insights do I have into that? The objections come along the following lines. The first objection you hear is, well, I don't drive across the Sellwood Bridge, so it's not my problem. Ding. Okay, it's part of the regional transportation infrastructure. And if we have problems on the Sellwood Bridge, if we close it or it goes out of service, it's simply going to move the traffic from Sellwood onto other bridges. So that was the first point. The second question was we're asking the wrong people to pay for it. Since 70% of the people who use it come from Clackamas County, why are we asking the taxpayers of Multnomah County to pay for it? That's a legitimate question in my mind. But the question that goes unanswered is those 70% that are coming from Clackamas County, where are they going? They're coming here to Multnomah County. They're coming here to spend their dollars. They're coming here to work. They're coming here to shop in our shops. They're coming here to eat in our restaurants. And so to that degree, I think there is a mutual benefit. I agree with the premise, though, of the objection, which is Clackamas County should participate in funding regional transportation infrastructure. And as I said, we're only raising $100 million. That does not excuse us from our obligation or our need to go to the regional table, nor does that in any way dampen my enthusiasm for fighting for a regional bridge authority or some other mechanism to take care of our bridge infrastructure. So we're still talking with Troutdale. It was a 4-3 vote. I believe we addressed most of the questions they had about the IGA, and then they moved on to other issues, and I still think we can address those other issues as well.
Susan Matthews, City Club member. You mentioned mental illness under both public safety and human services, and rightly you should, because so many people with mental illness are in our jails. There was a wonderful op-ed in the paper, in the Oregonian today, by the head of the Psychiatric Association, who noted that the lack of timely services and homelessness drives mentally ill people into conflicts with the law, and then they end up in prisons. Thus, this nexus of problems. And I would like to know how the county, in cooperation with the city and the state, is going to address this problem of housing and basic community services so that they don't end up in either the disaster of the Oregon State Hospital or the jails.
Yeah, and there's no quick or easy answer to your question, so I'll give you a broader answer to that, and if you want to email me, I'll actually give you the detailed answer that'll come directly from our housing director. But the bottom line is this: as part of the 10-year plan to end homelessness, as you know, the city builds affordable housing, and what we do is we put the supportive housing. We provide the wraparound services that include treatment, substance abuse, and mental health services, and we need to focus our efforts in that area. I think that's the best way that we can be helpful in terms of meeting that mission. In terms of there's a bigger picture. I attended a meeting on Friday night that was largely mental health consumers that wanted to share their thoughts and ideas with me. And what I heard loudly and clearly is that people believe Multnomah County can solve these problems independently of either the federal government, which controls the funding through Medicaid, or the state government, which controls our mental health funding through Verity, which is part of the Oregon Health Plan. There's going to have to be some mutual lifting here. The pieces we can work on, we will work on, and that includes, I believe, our obligations around the 10-year plan. The Secure Subacute Treatment Center is not related to the population you just described, but it's a glaring weakness, both in terms of the mental health need as well as the public safety need. And the mayor and I are unified in trying to get something done around those sooner rather than later.
I'm sorry we're out of time for additional questions. Ted, thank you for another mountaintop experience. We appreciate it. We're adjourned.